Welcome back. We are so happy to have you all here. We are on day one of the Food as Medicine Summit, and we are closing out the night with our longtime special guest. He's actually breakdancing here. He's sitting next to me, but he got up to breakdance to open his hour. We should have a video of him. So I just want to welcome everybody back. We have Alan Muscat in the house, and we're in store for a great hour here. My name is Janelle Kapoor. I'm your host for the Food as Medicine Summit, and I have got some special thanks as we close the evening. A thanks to all of our wonderful presenters, our affiliates and sponsors, and to the wonderful team of women on the back end who've made this summit possible. We've got Catherine Blau in the house, and Quinn Astake, and Felix, Sarah Levine. We also have Bea Schofield, Stacy Murphy, Kate Hanford, Britta Baker, Carrie Gatos, and the rest of our site crew, as well as Sherman the cat. So everybody's here, and it's really just been a great time getting to host this. We hope you all are enjoying, and really appreciate you being here. And really, it's you who bring this to life, so we can't emphasize it enough. We want this to be a real community experience, and of course, as most of you know, we have a Facebook page. Jump in there. There's probably going to be a lot of questions coming in for Alan Muscat on this hour, and if you have ever wondered about what's up with wild mushrooms, wild edibles, what you can do with mushrooms, what you don't want to do with wild mushrooms, how to learn about them, Alan's your man, and he is right here, so we're about to get right into it. Before we get into the call, you know about the Facebook page, facebook.com/Ashevillage, and, of course, our Food as Medicine Toolkit. Plenty of discounts and learning opportunities in there. Please take a look. It's fully guaranteed, so hop on in and enjoy all of the benefits that our presenters and affiliates are providing. On that note, I am excited to introduce it's like a brother. I'm going to introduce Alan Muscat to you. So Alan Muscat, philosophorager, stand-up mycomedian, an epicure of the obscure. Alan has been taking people out to eat, quote-unquote, for over 20 years. He founded the first and only forage-to-table company in the country and the first wild foods public education program in the world. Okay. I'll ask you about that. Author of Wild Mushrooms, A Taste of Enchantment, Muscat has popped up on Bizarre Foods, the History Channel, PBS, the Washington Post, and other major media. For 2 decades, Alan has sold hundreds of pounds of wild foods a year to over 50 restaurants and hotels. Muscat has taught self-catering to James Beard chefs, Dr. Andrew Weil, VPs of major corporations, and a number of other notables. The creator of the documentary GMO OMG was filming his next film about Alan's work, and in fact, Jeremy Seifert, who is the creator of that documentary, is presenting on our 3rd day of the Food as Medicine Summit. So watch out for him. And one last thing, again, Alan's offered in that Food as Medicine Toolkit his ebook, Wild Mushrooms, A Taste of Enchantment. So you'll find that in there. And without further ado, welcome, Alan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so let's just kick it off with, tell us about what does food as medicine mean to you, and what do you do that is food as medicine?
Oh, well, glad you asked. I don't always get to say what I think is most important, is that the medicine isn't really in the food. It's putting yourself into where it comes from. So, even if you don't find mushrooms, I tell people never to go mushroom hunting because it's too much focus. It's a recipe for disappointment. What you will always get is a sense of reconnection with nature. You get exercise, you get sunshine, you get a million things that are medicine, even if you don't put anything in your mouth. That's what it means most to me.
And what What is it
All right. If you can't tell what's happening, Janelle's making faces at me, and she failed to phase me, but it didn't take but a fraction of a second to do it to her. And so I'll just expand on the theme as she recovers her composure. And you can tell that we are old friends. I think this is a good lesson right here. I think it was Plato that said, I think Oscar Wilde, life is too important to be taken seriously. I think Plato said, no human thing is of serious importance. That's right. That was in the Republic. I think when you go foraging, you learn to take it easy because life is easy, because there's plenty for everyone. You live in a Garden of Eden. And that's the essence of the medicine to me, the sense of safety and being provided for. So you can screw around like we're doing now.
Yeah, Alan always manages to crack me up. So pardon me, he made one little face and I lost it. So, well, as you can tell, we've known each other a long time, and it's really interesting. Alan grew up in a family who certainly were not wild foragers, and some of us maybe have been blessed to have grown up that way, but I think it's a really interesting to hear the background of what actually brought you to the woods and to learning about wild foods and caring about them, and then, how did you get into this? What was your journey?
Well, my family might get sick of hearing this, but I like to joke that they're not woodland foragers, but I would certainly say they're urban ones, and not necessarily for food, but the first reason for foraging for many people is that it's free. Yeah, and my family all loves something for nothing. But I think everyone does. It's an Easter egg hunt. It's the original, and so I like to joke we used to go to yard sales all the time, and now I go to a yard sale every day in the yard, and it's just an extension of that, I think. In college, you could explicitly see that I cooked for the first time, I went hiking for the first time, and I was profoundly influenced by Taoism. It was a lot about just getting back to nature. So you just put those together, you end up with wild food. So it's a no-brainer, and I on a practical level, needed it to be free. I didn't have a job, and I didn't want one. I just wanted to go back to the land and do my own thing. So it was a personal thing at first, and then the selling that you mentioned came next. And now I just teach kids and all ages. But I told you the reasons I do it now. That medicine for me, I don't think I was aware of then. But I think it's always been grounding in a way that I could certainly use.
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. It's interesting that where you went to college and you're speaking of the time that you got into it. It wasn't necessarily that you were out in a wild land. I mean, you were in New Jersey and not far from New York City, and so it'd be interesting to share a bit about that, about how people can access this. One, because it's so important, and two, because more and more people are getting turned on to it. But how can people access this in their daily lives, even if they're living, let's say, not in the beautiful wildlands of New Jersey, but in, say, a suburb or in the city? Are there ways for people to enjoy connecting with wild foraging? Yeah.
There is more wild food in the city than there is in the woods. Yeah. So, New Jersey is a garden state, and I was in central New Jersey, and it's beautiful, and there's plenty of open areas for weeds to grow. And, 90% of what I have to teach in terms of what's common and edible are plants. My specialty is mushrooms, and there are hundreds of mushrooms, but really only 10 very common ones, whereas I could not narrow down plants to 10. I did it to 20, and that was difficult, of what I would call the most common. So, and, if I counted those, I would bet that all but two would be right in the city. So that was kind of has two questions. That was the second. And finding food in the city is not the hard part. The hard part is the education that you may have gotten that alienates you, and I got that certainly indirectly in school, which was to rely on books. So although going to Princeton afforded me like a great outdoor program, like I got out of there thinking the way to learn wild foods was from books, and I've learned over the years that it's probably the worst way to learn. And in the city you have a lot of other people around, and those are the people you need to learn from. You find someone either live or over internet, or with email, but it can be done easily when you have a community to learn from. That's what traditionally that someone would have, even in a village. The person next door would teach you. So in a sense, living in the city, you have more opportunity to find people to teach you, and the food is right there.
And how long do you find that it takes for people to learn about this? I mean, when is it safe to go out on your own, and how long does it take to learn?
Yeah, it's funny. One of my foraging alums I saw her the other day, and she has a daughter learning violin, and she hates to practice, but she loves to play. And I asked her, what's the difference, between practice and playing? And she said, the difference is having an audience. But a lot of the time, once you're good enough, you're not doing scales. You're just doing it. It's the same with wild food. I mean, you learn by doing it. And I think your question is, well, when can you feel safe to eat something without asking someone else? And I'd say that's gradual, too. You could learn one thing and get started tomorrow. I wouldn't say there are some things with lookalikes and other things that don't have them, because it's a question of practice, too. But if you're willing to ask someone, and that's the one word I tell people you have to remember, in order to be safe, you could start eating right away tomorrow, but you need to remember to ask someone. You find someone, again, even if you have to send somebody a photo on an email, you can get started right away. You don't have to wait until you can do it without asking anyone else. I mean, it's a sickness that we have to think DIY is like one person alone, not asking someone else. It's the purpose of these workshops, to meet the plants live and meet someone live who can at least get you started. But you have to continue that. Practice and guidance are the two things that will let you start eating them stuff right away.
You mentioned DIY, do it yourself. We've recoined it as DIT, do it together.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I had to smile, and you mentioned, just ask and send photos. So here's a little story. Years ago, my mother and father and I were walking in the mountains here in Appalachia, and we ended up getting very, very, very lost. But on our walk, we were harvesting mushrooms, and we used my mom's windbreaker as our basket, and we started loading them with these boletes. And by the time we got back, and it was quite a story, but we ended up showing Alan our harvest, and I know we must have had 17 varieties of mushrooms, and a lot of them were boletes, which are very slimy, and they, after hours and hours of walking, they slimed all over the jacket. But I'm curious about how do you, I'm not sure that I've learned it, and I'm sure you could tell a story or two about this, but how do you know the difference between the poisonous and the non-poisonous, and, what's safe to eat, what's not? And you might get to know a couple things, but how do you really, is there a way, are there any specific characteristics of the mushrooms especially, or do you just, and how many deadly ones are there? What can you say about all of that?
Yeah, this is if there's one thing I learned studying philosophy, is how hopeless the human mind can be. You're asking, than most people do for simple answers. Like, it's like asking
me. Me hopeless.
No, believe me, I am far more hopeless when that comes to that. It's like asking me, well, how do you drive? It's complicated, and yet we can all do it because we've practiced and we had our parents or somebody teach us how. Around the world, people do it, and there is no simple answer. I mean, that doesn't make it dangerous any more than it makes driving dangerous. You're careful and you get practice. So I have a classic example that I use to answer this question, and as a case in point, I couldn't remember where I first heard this. And I thought, did I make this up? Well, then I encountered an interview with Yul Gibbons from, I think, 1971. He's like the original Wild Foods guy. He uses the same example. He says, how can you tell cabbage from iceberg lettuce? I mean, you can, right? So did you learn it from a book? No, right? Did you learn it from, your parents? No, you didn't have to try, and no one had to try to teach you. You just saw them both over and over again. And it would be the same with a deadly mushroom that you would say is a look-alike, to an edible one if I showed them to you. And you'd be terrified. And then, if it turned out one was lettuce and one was cabbage, you'd be a joke a few years later when you had gotten used to seeing them. It doesn't have a simple answer, and it's not difficult. It's a gestalt, familiar is like family. You wouldn't be able to tell someone you just met in a police lineup, the next day if you only saw them for a few seconds. But if your brother was in that or your mom, they're familiar. It's that simple.
Families in a police lineup, though. Okay. All right, we're going to stay focused. So, and what is it, what is it that you find most engaging about this work that's kept you going all these years? And, knowing you as I do, there's lots of interests that you have, and the wild foods and the wild mushrooms have really been with you for 2 decades more than 2 decades now. So what keeps you engaged? What do you love about it?
Well, I hate it. And I struggle every day with quitting, and I never want to do it again. And I talked to my coach today about this, and like everyone else, she said, it's actually very worthwhile what you're doing. And I thought, oh no, I just fell into this. It would be far more meaningful if I was talking about spirituality, or I just went and lived in a monastery and said, oh no, there's a lot of value. This is eco-spirituality, Alan. So my struggle, the only thing that makes it meaningful to me is to try to get out of the rut of just teaching people how they can treat the woods like a supermarket, and try to shift how I teach into telling them that the only medicine is in relationship. The only sickness is love sickness, and there's love all around us, not just from human beings. We don't feel alone, we don't feel afraid if we feel like we have community in nature. And when I teach, I don't always get around to that. We get distracted by the practicalities. What can I eat? How do I prepare it? And that gets old. So it's actually a struggle all the time, and that trying to shift that conversation is what keeps this alive for me.
Thank you for your candor, and I actually can very much relate. It was for a long time teaching natural building, and still do sometimes, and I actually have no interest in building per se, and would rather not see more buildings built, but it was more of a gateway into how we can really connect again with our deepest nature, and with the simplicity of life, and how are we designing our futures, and where is our happiness, and it's in that direct connection with the natural world, and really getting back to the basics. And as we talk about food as medicine, I think there's something implicit in that it's not in this summit, maybe some of you thought you were signing on to something we were going to be talking about prescribed diets, or, a particular recipe to lose weight or something. And it's not that at all. It's really, I feel, a much deeper question of how do we reconnect the dots in our culture and in our lives in a time when, when that disconnection is happening throughout our culture, and where is the web of life that we're a part of, and how do we reconnect that? And our food is such a vital part of what that is. So, yeah. Well, I guess, on that note, it'd be nice to hear what are some of the profound moments that in all these years that stand out, having taken, at this point, thousands of people out into the woods and, sort of the other end of the spectrum from it being about the forest becoming the next supermarket. It's like, where have those moments been that have touched you, touched your soul, and, transformed you? Anything come to mind that you'd like to share? Oh, he's so sweet. He's got tears in his eyes. I'm passing the phone back to Alan. Yes, you do. I see them.
That was actually tears of laughter, because I was remembering when I went foraging with Janelle, and she had these torn pants.
I'm waiting for the story to come out. So be careful.
And the photo, by the way, is on my website, notastelikehome.org. You can see a substantial fraction of Janelle's posterior in this photo. So that was transformative for me. And actually, I thought the story you were going to tell with the boletes was the other time where you picked all those mushrooms, and she didn't know what they were, and she still picked 2 shopping bags full. And they asked me what they were, and I was like, why'd you pick 2 shopping bags? If you weren't sure, you're just going to have to throw them out again. She's like, oh, I knew they were edible. I was like, how'd you know? She said, because he said if you taste a mushroom and it tastes okay and doesn't burn your mouth, then it's edible. And I never said that. And I realized, oh, I said that about a particular kind of mushroom. It's like if you know you have a bolete, for example, then, yeah, for the boletes, that may be true. It's actually a different kind I'm talking about. But, see, that's the human mind overgeneralizing. And not just Janelle's, but everyone does that. You still want my little story? You hate me? Right, so I took this couple out from New York City, and we start out at 4 p.m., and, I got maybe 2 hours. It's October. So I think, these people are paying me a lot of money. We need to see stuff. So I drive them around town where I know there's stuff growing. Okay, in this front yard, here's some acorn. In this front yard is oyster mushrooms on this log. And they say to me, we really want to go to the woods. So I'm like, okay, let's go to the woods. And it's getting dark. We get in the woods. We just start wandering, and they're having the time of their life. And, we find 1 or 2 mushrooms, but not great amounts. But it's gorgeous. It's idyllic, with moss, and we're just hopping over streams. And we're driving back in the dark. We couldn't see our hands. And the guy says to me, I want to be a mushroom hunter. I don't need to be a mushroom finder. And that's when it started to click for me, just 2 or 3 years ago, that I put context over content. Let's get at home in the woods, and I remember once, I tell you, I was going swimming with someone. We found persimmons on the way, and we look back and say, oh, that was our first swimming day. We were just going swimming. We weren't going looking for food. That's why I say just go enjoy your time in the woods. And believe me, sooner or later, it's kind of like it's playing, jackpot. You'll hit it. It'll be enough. You don't have to find it every day. It's a way of life that, where you trust that you'll be provided for. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful story. Reminds me just this past Sunday, it was Easter Sunday or Passover. And there was a picnic in the park, and we got there, and we were just walking around, and we ended up harvesting bags of violets and dandelions and nettles and chickweed, and it was just, part of the normal thing we do now when we are out in the spring. It's just par for the course. So maybe you could share something with us, going from the profound to some sort of the practical, some particular things that those listening could actually, keep an eye out for when they're walking outside, or some practical tips of if they're foraging, or, maybe even a little teaser of what you'd be offering in the workshop. Alan Muscat is teaching part of the Wild Food and Fermentation Workshop the last week of May in Asheville, North Carolina. And, of course, you can guess that he'll be taking everyone on a wild foods adventure focusing on the mushrooms. And so it'll be a 3-hour afternoon tour, as one of the afternoons, with many of our other teachers as well. So, yeah, is there a teaser you can, here we are, we're talking about the most profound thing, but I'm just going to ask for something practical that folks listening can take home and put into practice.
Yeah, sure. Well, there are, like I said, there's 10 mushrooms, I would say, that over the years of getting hundreds of pounds a year, not for just myself, but selling to restaurants, 90% of that volume was from these just 10 mushrooms. One of them will be, well, I can't say will be, but is the season at the end of May for. And, quite fortuitously, it happens to be one of the 3 medicinals in that bunch. It's reishi. So that will be right at the close of reishi season. So we have a good chance of finding some really big reishi that people can take home, and conceivably with about 20 pounds last you all year and have a tonic that's a cancer preventative and curative to some extent. So my advice is to focus just on the 10 in your area, which are likely to be overlap with this list, and you'll get a list if you come to the workshop. And you can find it online as well, and directions that we'll go over. And I'd spend an entire day just on reishi in the workshop. But if you live in a city, for example, you don't need to know everyone's name in the city. If you have a handful of good friends, you're lucky. And that's all you need with mushrooms or plants. Like I said, 10 at most is all you need to know, and you pretty much learn one a season. And they're spread across the season. We won't see them all, at the end of May. Everything has its season. The top variety for mushrooms is in September, but right now we're looking at morels, and that's some of people's favorites. So that's the first lesson. It's my hardest lesson: is learn to focus. You don't need to do it all. Certainly not in one season.
Well, you were talking about reishi and that it helps prevent cancer. And what else can you tell us about reishi for those who don't know what it is, and what properties does it carry? What are its benefits, and how would you prepare it? How do you eat it? Do you tell us about reishi?
Yeah, it's the Japanese for linji, which is more correctly translated as herb of spiritual potency, and in English sometimes translated as mushroom of immortality. And I like to joke that I've only been taking it 300 years, so I don't know if it works yet. But I'll tell you what it has helped with. I think it made me calmer. And that spiritual potency is actually that on the deepest level, it helps you know why you're here in the world. What is your purpose in this lifetime? And it gives you that certainty and clarity that a lot of people are lacking today. And a lot of the diseases that it treats could be secondary to that. It's known for 160 different things, 160 documented uses, not just cancer. And I don't memorize them all, but I take reishi every day as a tonic. And you take it by making what some people call a tea, but you simmer it. So you do what's called a decoction. You just boil it for hours on very low, and you drink what comes out of there. And I will concentrate that and then make ice cubes that I pull one out of the freezer every day. It's very simple, and that is from some of the most advanced, cancer medicine you can get, and you make it right at home in water. And so it's very simple. It just takes the kind of lifestyle change that in your morning that you might have coffee every morning, you would just throw this in it, for example. And there is a brand of coffee called Gano Cafe where they put reishi in. Gano is the Latin name for reishi, and so it's actually mixed into a coffee mix. But you can make your own with natural reishi that is cleaner and far more potent than that stuff is probably coming from China and irradiated, and it doesn't have the story that, I harvested this and so I have a relationship with it.
So you're talking about reishi, and that it, one of the things that reishi is known for is helping to prevent cancer. And do you have any personal experiences with people who have either through reishi or another mushroom or some kind of wild food story that was this deeply transformative healing of an ailment? Do you know of anyone who's actually sort of healed themselves from?
Well, we of course we're making no claim. It's a disclaimer, but these are anecdotal. But I've been hearing more and more recently people taking reishi by the shot, not just as a tonic, but like, I have a cold coming on, I take a shot of reishi, it knocks it out. I mean, that's a stimulant. You hear that about, say, echinacea, right, or vitamin C. But I talked to Jessica, who I learned a lot of this from, Jessica Godino, and she said, it's quite possible. And so I've heard those informal stories on a small scale. I can say on a large scale that this is certainly no proof, but my own partner got cancer last year, as you know, and they took out the tumor, and I'm religiously now making her take reishi, and her scan, 6 months later came out clear, and she's about due for the year scan, and we can't say it's thanks to the mushrooms, but we're doing it, and it's good for her regardless. For chaga, I have heard back from a woman who bought it for tumors on her dog, and say that they reversed them. They started, last I heard from her, they were greatly reduced in size. So, I'm not a practitioner, so I don't, it'd be Jessica to get a lot of those stories from, and I de-emphasize it in a way. I just, speaking of hopeless, I tell people in a way, focusing on our own personal health too much and expecting to find a magic bullet for it is what caused all the problems in the first place. And even if you knock out a cancer one way or the other, half the time it comes back in 5 or 10 years because you haven't treated the cause. The cause that you hold a resentment or you feel alone in the world and don't really like being here. And that's where reishi comes in the long term, with that. That's not very easy to measure, You have to talk to people and see how they know them through the years and know themselves, Like you've known me.
And I have known you, my dear. Yes, indeed. I see wild foraging sort of on the rise, and the fermentation movement, the local food movement, slow food, and this desire to reconnect. And what happens? I mean, you take a lot of people out, and sometimes you take large groups out. And we live in an area where a lot of people are very turned on. In fact, I was talking about this day in the park. Someone had already gotten to that nettle patch that we went to. Luckily, nettles, grows overnight and keeps growing, and there was certainly plenty more, and it was a large patch. But what about sort of the overgrazing of the wilds and too much foraging, and what can you share with us about that?
Yeah. So there's like three main objections, four to foraging, and we touched on some of them, and I'll answer this one. It's pretty much the third. The first is people are going to kill themselves. You're crazy. Like, this is too dangerous. Number two is too much work. Number three, that we're going to destroy the woods. And then number four, that there's not enough out there for everyone anyway. This just isn't an option. And I'll answer the third, and if anyone's interested in the other three, you can call in. But I tell people foraging doesn't hurt the woods. Not foraging is what hurts the woods. So if everyone in Asheville suddenly went out foraging tomorrow and ransacked the woods, and they just took machetes to the woods, we would still be better off than we are right now. The analogy that Steve Will gave me when I posed this question to him, he teaches wild food, is that's like saying, what if everybody suddenly starts riding their bikes instead of driving? Wouldn't they clog the streets? And the answer is yes, but it's better than driving. So the thing that foraging is better than is agriculture. Agriculture means growing in a field, literally. And fields are not natural in 90-something% of the earth. And if you try to grow things in a field that don't thrive there on their own without our help, then you have to irrigate, you have to fertilize. Those things devastate the land. And that's after you've cut down the woods to make it sunny enough to grow the things we love to eat: wheat, corn, mostly grains, barley. And that we're realizing now, 5,000 years later, are some of the worst things we could be eating for ourselves and the planet. So they create deserts inside us and outside us. And it's shocking to realize that when you're looking at wild food, you're questioning the foundation of civilization and realizing just how destructive, every bite you take normally is when you don't harvest yourself from the woods. That's a very quick answer, and I could clarify that more if I skipped a piece of that. But that's something I've come to appreciate in retrospect more about how valuable. And I want to say, I'm going to go ahead and say for point number 4, not everyone can go foraging now. There's not enough for everyone. I'm going to just assume that's the case, but I'm not proposing that we all live on foraging, and it's not what people lived on before agriculture, because what they actually did is they did permaculture. There was a certain degree to which they did manage the land. They didn't cut everything down and plant what they wanted that wasn't already there, but they made space for certain things. They cleared some areas. They planted for diversity. And permaculture is not my thing. You have other people who teach that. But foraging is the piece of that simply says, why pull out the weeds to struggle to keep them out? Why don't you just eat the weeds and go with the flow? That's the angle that I take from what makes my life so much easier and healthier for me and for the planet.
Thank you. We are here with Alan Muscat, the mushroom man himself, and we have just a little while longer for the first day of the Food is Medicine Summit, about 20 more minutes. And I want to remind you, if you're just tuning in now, that there is a Facebook page, facebook.com/Ashevillage. We're in Asheville, North Carolina, and Ashevillage is the host of the Food is Medicine Summit, and that is spelled ASHE, Village, one word. And if you get on that Ashevillage Facebook page, we'd love you to like us. We'd like you to like us. And you can pop in and ask your questions there, and our team is bringing your questions to us. So I'm going to ask one more question here, at least one more, and we'll see what other questions are coming in. But Ellen, what are some of you've already shared a lot of what you've learned along the way. What are some of the lessons you've learned? Anything else that you want to highlight? Either that or just anything that you feel is really important that you'd like to share as we begin to shift into the open Q&A.
Yeah, I'm going to be brief to leave time for that because I had the good fortune of you letting me speak to what I felt was most important already. And I'll mention the kids program that you wanted to know about really briefly. I looked around and I could not, at least in English language, find any mention that a public school anywhere had adopted or basically put foraging into the curriculum as a basic skill. And that's something that we have started to encourage schools to do, first locally and then hoping to go to county, state, and national level. That, we learn math, reading, and writing, but to me, for many reasons, a basic skill is knowing the 10 edible, useful wild foods in your area. I think every kid in school should be learning that. And we've started here in Asheville.
So that's a kids program that you've helped initiate for teaching children how to forage for wild and natural edible foods out in the wild, yeah?
Exactly.
Oh, that's exciting. You think you know someone. I didn't even know that. That's so exciting. Okay, great. Well, we have some quick questions coming in. We have Nori Hunter from Portland, Oregon. She says, I Googled Alan and came across a YouTube video of the Mushroom Man. Oh, here we go. Alan, do you have a mushroom you'd like to share with us? Okay, this is by phone, but he's live here. We get to watch him do some rap for you. Yeah, we want a performance.
Well, the audio. Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to give you a snippet because this is the third verse of 4, and it is on the website, and of course I'll do it at the workshop. But this is the piece being entitled A Fistful of Fungus. Now some people be complaining that I'm raping the woods because I've never been acquainted with my personal goods. If you came to my class and then you start to see, you pick a mushroom off a ground, picking fruit off a tree like a monster in a storybook. I'm telling you, you cut off one mushroom, gonna grow back. So I might be castrating, but they still get to mating because the fungus still be growing down in the substrate. Boom.
Now he's breakdancing.
yeah, that's enough.
Alan just did the worm for us. Okay, all right, there we go. Thank you, Nori Hunter. We're so glad you asked. We might have to do a post interview performance and get it up on the Facebook page. Okay, we have a few other questions coming in. Another one from Portland, Oregon. Sapling Susie. Hello, Sapling Susie. She says, I really appreciate your comments on the reishi mushroom being used as a daily tonic to heal your body and mind. Beyond the physiological benefits of ingesting mushrooms, how is it that mushrooms can act on our psychological nature as well?
Yowza. It's funny, I had the good fortune of being brought on to the fantastic fungi team, and they said, we don't have anybody. We figured out that people are interested in mushrooms for food, for environmental, cleanup reasons, and then for psychoactive reasons. We have the first two covered, but can you be like the tripping mushrooms guy for us? I had to laugh. I don't know much about it, and I can say that, for pharmacology aside, which I'm no expert on, I'm not sure if that's the question, but I can just say that things I spoke about wild foods in general are true of mushrooms in particular. I mean, there's a lot of fascination with mycelium. That's what the fungus is that creates mushroom. And connects everything together. It's like a woods wide web. And, even you can read Terence McKenna and other people about how mushrooms affect our psychology. But I think that, in a way, every mushroom is psychoactive, when you connect to the idea that we aren't isolated in the world. No tree is. We think above ground, we look at animals devouring each other, and we think it's like a dog-eat-dog world. But the fungus under the soil is creating all this cooperation. And that's literally true, even though it's invisible, not only underground. It's like you couldn't see the threads or a seventh the thickness of your hair. And to me, it's an appreciation of that which brings you the best, psychological benefits. And I think invisibly we do that. We can do that for each other as well. And I don't know if that's too, not the kind of hard answer she was looking for, but it's the valuable one.
Great. Well, thank you, Alan. We have a question here from Christina Taylor, and if you have a question, we still have some time. You can get into the facebook.com/Ashevillage, ASHE Village, and ask your question there. Christina Taylor has a question. I've been seeing and enjoying lots of cacao powder mixes that have reishi and chaga powder in them. Do you have any experience with using the powder forms in recipes? If so, how would you use them? And for those of you who don't know reishi, but then there's also chaga, CHAGA, and that's another kind of mushroom, and so that's what Christina's referencing. So, again, the question is, have you experienced using powder forms in recipes, and how would you use them?
Yeah, so it's a very practical, hands-on question that I can address, and I say I have mixed all three together. I've used chaga instead of cacao, and each of those has its issues about to what degree is it useful or even digestible to have it raw versus cooked, and how much does it have to be cooked? There's a lot of hype about doing things raw, and I think it's appropriate for certain things and not others. To the best of my understanding, mushrooms need to be cooked in order to be digestible, about 90% of the time. There's only very few of us who have chitinase in our digestive tract, which, like lactase, keeps you from being lactose intolerant, keeps you from being chitin intolerant, which most of us are. So chitin is what is in lobster shells. You wouldn't grind up lobster shells and eat them. But when you're eating a mushroom raw, that's essentially what you're doing. Now, chaga, that's for reishi, okay? And the directions are on my website, and we'll talk about it in the workshop. In fact, we may make some hands-on. Now, chaga isn't actually a mushroom. It's the mycelium. And so there's some debate about, do you boil it? Will you kill enzymes? How do you prepare it? I talk about it at length on my website. And it's the same for cacao. It's extremely high in phytic acid. It may not be very healthy to be eating it completely raw. It's actually always been fermented at least, and if not roasted. But so if you get a powder of reishi from the store or something, and it has not been cooked, and you want to put it in like a bonbon thing or something like that, then even if you're going to bake it, some people would say it has to be boiled, not just heated, or you won't get anything out of it. And that may or may not be true of chaga, and I've looked into it, and it will make your head spin to try to find out the answer, and I've all but given up and shifted into all this spiritual stuff instead.
Okay. So Stephanie Davis, you asked, and it's been almost an hour, you asked around the recordings. You joined a little late, and is there any way to go back and listen to conversations that have already been presented? And absolutely, all of the presentations from today, the last 4 hours, will be available for free for the next 48 hours. There are replays, and those are on the welcome page. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So if you've signed in for the summit, you would be taken to the welcome page, and that's where all the replays are being posted for free. Of course, there are also all the recordings from all the presenters will be included in the toolkit, and so you can get the Food as Medicine toolkit. It's 100% guaranteed and available to you through the rest of the summit. And Alan is actually contributing his book. Maybe you could give us a brief mention of what's the book, what's it about, and we do have an additional question after that. So tell us about your book. And
yeah, you get an ebook. It's a PDF. It's 42 pages, chock full of. If you like my sense of humor, you'll love the book, and a lot of practical things too. We didn't get to that I usually do hands-on, and I will in the workshop. Like, what do I take with me? You know, where should I go mushroom hunting? Where shouldn't I? When do I go? What are those top 10 that you recommend? And how do you prepare them? Why do you have to cook mushrooms? We did cover. And what does it mean when it says edible with caution in the book? You know, which books do you recommend? A whole bunch of, practical things like that.
Thank you, Alan. And we have a question here from Courtney Cribb. Hi, Courtney. And Courtney says, hi, Alan.
Hey.
So she says, I have some reishis I picked last summer and air-dried. They've been sitting out all year. Are they okay to use now for decoction?
Yeah, if they didn't get molds drying, which would look green, on it, or white, then I would say they would keep, I'm going to roughly guess, a few years. Yeah, I think you're good to go with them.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Courtney, for your question. We've got a few more greetings from various fans, Mr. Muscat. And so we're about to bring this to a wrap-up. If you could highlight for those listening, what will you be offering in the workshop that's coming up in late May? And just describe what that time with you would be like.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's an experience that you can't just get, listening to this. And it's one I recommend. If you live too far away, to go out with us. There's people everywhere. And you go out, and we're going to give everyone baskets and a brife, which is basically a brush and a knife taped together. And it's one thing to read about this, it's in the booklet, and it's another to go through the process. So if the season runs late, for example, we'll actually cook up some reishi, because if you find it young, you can actually eat it like steak, and that's really practically, very few people know that it's delicious when still tender. And if it is late, I'll actually save some and bring it with me, and we'll try some of that. And we will go in the woods and find spread out, give each other, give you like 10, 15 minutes to get back together and look at what we found. Not just reishi, potentially other mushrooms, and chicken of the woods is unknown to be found that time of year. That's the thing with foraging. You never know what you're going to find. And, and we'll compare things side by side, and you'll get to hear the rest of that, of my song and dance as well. And if Janelle comes, you get to see us fight.
We'll brawl, we'll wrestle. Yes, we have a question from Kate Blue here, and she's asking, what is your favorite mushroom, and how do you like to prepare it?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, the studied answer is I said foragers can't be choosers, right? It pays to not have a favorite, but I really like the parasol. We're getting a lot of calls from Portland. That was my first experience, both with mushrooms and with my favorite. Out there was the shaggy parasol, and here we have more of the tall, thin ones, just called the parasol. And I saute it with butter. There's a cookbook author in the turn of the last century who said, a mushroom is so severe in its austere chastity that it allows but butter, salt, and pepper to approach it. So that's true, except for garlic. So maybe she gets around a little more, but those 4 is enough to pretty much make any mushroom delicious. So that's my favorite.
Well, thank you. And we're here with Alan Muscat, and this recording will be available for the next 48 hours for free, and you can listen again and again to him rapping about mushrooms and telling stories. And we are just about to wrap up here. For those of you who want to continue with us the next 2 days, we have more really exciting presenters coming up. Tomorrow's very focused on the Nourish Kitchen and more about wild edibles. We have Jenny McBrother coming in. She is the author of The Nourish Kitchen. We also have Juliet Blancaspor and Sierra Foley, both incredible teachers, talking about their favorite wild edibles of spring. And I know they're going to be highlighting around violets and dandelions and nettles. And we also have Corey Pine Shane and Todd Elliott, and we'll be closing out with Dina Falcone. And so we're just really appreciative of all of these wise teachers coming in and sharing their knowledge and many years of experience. And I think the theme and the message we've been getting is that, it's clearly not just about the food as much as it is about building the relationship with what's meaningful in our lives, and that's a big part of what it means to be connected to food as medicine and really make sense of that in our lives as modern people. And so, again, just appreciating all the stories shared this evening. It's been a very rich 4 hours, and we, of course, want to remind those of you listening about the Food as Medicine Toolkit. Now, this is the summit is available for free, and again, the recordings will be available, the replays, for 48 hours. We do have offerings from all of the presenters and affiliates. And there's well over 20 items in this package, and it's available only during the summit. It's been designed for the Food as Medicine Summit, and it's only available during the summit for it's got a value of $3,200, but it's available for $97. And in there is Alan Muscat's book. There's also a 9-month botany course that is included, the whole 9-month program. And that's an online program. Everything is an online item, meaning videos, ebooks, there's discounts, there's educational courses, all that you can participate online with. And there's also lists of gluten-free, how to create a pantry if you're gluten-free. There's just so much in there. So please do take a look, and that's at ashevillage.org/toolkit. And Ashevillage is spelled A-S-H-E, Village. And for Alan Muscat, if you want to find out more about his programs, please take a look. Not only his programs, but he does private tours. And he also, as he shared with us, has been working with children, teaching the first in the nation, the foraging program for youth. And so you can go to notastelikehome.org, notastelikehome.org. And this is with Alan Muscat and the Food as Medicine Summit. And again, a big thank you to all of you, our listeners. We've really enjoyed having you. And feel free to continue commenting, sharing resources, asking your questions. We'll be encouraging our presenters to chime in, and you can be having the conversations with them there on the Facebook page. And last but not least, also a big thanks again to our team who've been handling all the technology in the back end and keeping up with all of you. And so thanks, and we hope you have a lovely evening, and we'll see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, starting day 2 off with Jenny McBrother of the Nourish Kitchen. And with that, we are complete.